And open them to Luke chapter 6. I want to just look at one verse. Here's kind of really kind of a foundational verse for this kind of aspect of our study. It really maybe for the whole study, but definitely for this aspect of our study. And we're going to be looking at this at least tonight and next week, and maybe for several weeks. This theme, this idea that we're talking about here, because it's going to take us a little while to work through, and we want to take our time with it. But the title I put on here of this lesson is Focus on the Heart, and that will be a key element here. So Luke chapter 6 and verse 45. Would somebody want to read that for us?
I will.
Okay.
A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks.
And I'm not going to necessarily unpack this verse or really spend a lot of time on it tonight. Just to want to use this to kind of introduce the idea here of really this idea of focusing on the heart. Jesus said that the heart is the source for, in this case, either good or evil. Whatever comes good, whatever comes evil, it comes out of the heart. And so Jesus said that's the key here. He says what the words that come out of our mouth are simply fruit of the root of what's in our heart. And that's something we're going to keep in mind. That's really a key principle when it comes to parenting, and it's a key principle when it comes to a lot of things. But obviously we're talking specifically about parenting. So just kind of as a couple of introductory thoughts I want to give you tonight as we kind of get into this. Because I think it's helpful for us to understand a very basic principle that is kind of just foundational for us. And it's this, you have it there in your notes. As we live under God's authority, so our children need to live under our authority. And there is a definite parallel here that we need to understand. We live under God's authority. And there's a reason, the way I worded that is specific. As we live under God's authority, so our children need to live under our authority. The reason that our children need to live under our authority is not because we are bigger than them. Which, by the way, that if you're counting on that, at some point that may not be true. Now, I'm not all that worried about that myself, but
he's getting there.
Yeah, I'm not that worried about it. He's still got a ways to go if he wants to catch me, and I'm not sure he's going to get there. But, my wife, on the other hand, well, it's too late, okay? And the reality is, right? So that's not it, okay? It's not because we're smarter, because what you might find is that you may actually find that your kids grow up and they have the ability to outsmart you, okay? I quit playing chess against Michael when he was like 8. I played him once. I think literally I played you one time in chess. And I went, okay, I'm done. Because I beat him, but not very easily. And I went, okay, I'm not much of I don't play chess anyways that much. But I'm like, okay, that's it. Like, one and done, okay? Not doing chess anymore. So I let him play chess against other people. But
So you only play him in games you can win.
Well, just chess.
That's lesson 3.
Just chess. That's lesson 4. Yeah, just chess. Just chess. No. But the truth is, right? Why do our children need to live under our authority? It's because of this simple principle. Because we are living under God's authority. And so there is a direct command here. Okay, you're probably familiar with it. Ephesians 6 and verse 1. What does it say? Anybody know that verse? Just off the top of your head? If you're a parent and you don't know that verse, shame on you. You should know that verse. I'm kidding. So, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Okay. But actually, it's interesting is because Paul doesn't just say children obey your parents. He says children obey your parents in the Lord. Why? Because God's authority is ultimately what is at stake. Okay. And so we're talking about as parents, our children are to live under our authority because we are under God's authority. Is it any wonder, by the way, that parents in the United States in 2023, generally, by and large, do not have any clue about their kids being under their authority, because most of those parents aren't under God, they don't consider themselves under God's authority. So they don't understand that basic principle. They don't see themselves as people under authority. So they don't see their children then as needing to be under their authority. Or if they see that as something they want, they have no idea how to make it happen. But they don't, first of all, see themselves. And this is where we as Christians, if you're a Christian, you need to see this. Fundamentally, we should understand this principle. You should understand that you are under God's authority. That is why, if you're a parent, your children should be under your authority. By the way, it's not just parents. That's why if you're a Sunday school teacher, the kids in your Sunday school class should be under your authority. That's why if you're working in the nursery, the kids in the nursery should be under your authority. That's why if you are at any point, if you're babysitting, if you're at any point responsible for children, the reason they should be under your authority is because you are under God's authority. There is an authority structure that is inherent in the world, and children need to find their place in it. Okay? And this is a very important principle that we want to start with as a foundational truth. Okay? Let me give you a couple things. And these are kind of introduction, but they're also just some things I want to get out on the table, and then we will work through some of them as we go. But some three kind of goals. We think about what is the goal of parenting. Well, parenting doesn't just have one goal. We did talk about last week about the goal, the idea that we as worshipers are to raise our children to be worshipers of God, right? If we're worshipers of God, we should raise our children to be worshipers. And if you weren't here last week, it is online. You can go on YouTube, you can watch it, and you can catch up on that one from last week if you want. But want to kind of look at a little bit more targeted thought here. Okay, so three basic goals. First of all, and really looking at childhood as three stages. Okay, first stage from 0 to 5. What is the goal of parenting from 0 to 5? Well, here's the goal. It's establishing authority. Establishing authority. Or in other words, teaching obedience. Right? The goal of parenting from age 0 to 5 is establishing authority or teaching obedience. We will unpack that more at a later point. I'm just kind of putting this out there for you to get us started. Okay, but then when we get to that 6 to 12 range, okay, what happens at about age 5 to 6? Well, kids start going off to school, right? Kids start developing a little more independence in what they do. And as a result, mom and dad aren't there to tell them what to do in each situation. So how do we direct them when we're not able to give them specific instruction in each situation? Well, that's the key in the next stage from age 6 to 12. And again, these numbers are just rough ideas. Okay, don't hold me to this. Like 6th birthday. Okay, now we're done with the obedience stage. No. Okay, but from age 6 to 12, our goal is to help them grow in character. Right? Because how do we help our kids to do what's right when we're not there to tell them what's right? They have to have character. Right? They have to have some principle that has been trained in them to do what is right when we're not there to tell them what is right. Okay? And so that's really the second stage. The first stage is all about authority, establishing authority, teaching obedience. Second stage is about character, helping them grow in character. Now, by the time you get to the teenage years, the goal there, and this is how I would put it, the goal is to cultivate biblical wisdom. The goal in teenage years is to cultivate biblical wisdom. So this is kind of, again, giving you a little bit of a framework here. We're going to be focusing more right now probably on the first one at this point, just because this is a good foundational place to start. Okay. And this will give us a little bit of the framework for our discussion. But when it comes to the teenage years, the goal is cultivating biblical wisdom. Now, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll just hold on to them. Question: why isn't external compliance? See, of these, you've got these three goals. Obviously, the first one, establishing authority, teaching obedience. Okay. Why is that not enough? Why can't we just do that and then end it? Okay. Why isn't mere obedience or external compliance enough? Isn't it enough if your children learn to obey you?
Because you're not always going to be there.
Okay. They're going to be out of your house. You're not always going to be there to direct them.
Soon enough, they're going to have their own thoughts and go, well, if mom and dad don't see it, it doesn't matter.
Okay. I would say sooner rather than later, because you can see that in your toddlers, right? You know, if you're spying on them and you see them looking to see if mom or dad is watching before they do what they know they're not supposed to do, I mean, you know, it's not later, it's sooner that happens. But yeah, it's true. Here's a question for you to think about. How does God feel about mere obedience, mere external compliance to the rules? What's God's kind of general, if you, just based on your familiarity with Scripture, you don't have to quote verses here, but just based on your familiarity with Scripture and what you know of the Bible, what does God think about just following the rules, just obeying, just mere external obedience?
He had some pretty harsh words for the Pharisees.
Okay, we're going to read those in a little bit, or a couple of them, yeah, because he did. Jesus had some really harsh words to say to the Pharisees because that's what they were doing, right? They were absolutely following the rules. Externally, they were doing all of the things they were supposed to be doing. What was the problem with the Pharisees? Why was Jesus so hostile to them? What was his big complaint about them?
They didn't understand the heart behind it.
Right. They didn't love God. They were doing the things that they were supposed to do, but they weren't actually doing it sincerely from their hearts. And God was not pleased with that, right? So if it doesn't please God when we act toward him that way, right? Externally comply with what he wants, but our heart is not in it. If that doesn't please God, why would we accept that from our children? So this is where some of the parenting approaches really go wrong, because they all focus on getting the children to comply externally, okay? Get them to follow the rules, get them to obey, get them to do what I want them to do. Well, guess what? God isn't happy with that when you do it. Why would you accept that from your kids? You're not training them then. You're not training them to be worshipers of God. You're not training them to really follow it. Yeah.
What is the verse about obeying joyfully? Was that with a joyful heart? You know that?
I don't.
Obey right away and joyfully.
I'm not sure that's actually a verse though.
It
I
might
was
be a
gonna
sub.
look to see if it was.
It might be it was in Titus's 3K curriculum, Christian
Okay.
curriculum, and they brought it down to.
So it's probably
that.
like a paraphrase
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
verse. Yeah, and I don't know what that.
Okay,
I
I'll
don't-
look it up.
I don't. I was gonna say, I don't know what that would be exactly, but maybe yeah, maybe it's based on.
Philippians 2:14, do all things without grumbling or disputing. I
Okay.
don't know, but
I think that's what it was.
that's the first thing that Google
I'll
said.
look it up.
So,
It's
The
good.
obedience song has that principle.
The obedience. Well, so when we think about this, this is why we're getting to this, to what we're talking about tonight, right? So your first point there is the importance of the heart. This is why the heart matters, because God is not impressed with your external compliance to the rules. Okay, we can all do that. Anybody can do that. Anybody, any person, whether they even have an ounce of spiritual life in them, can be a rule follower. Okay? People are really good at being rule followers and putting on that kind of show, but it doesn't matter because their heart isn't right. And so we want to talk about the heart. Why is the heart important? Okay, and we're specifically talking about children here, but obviously this applies beyond that. But first of all, behavior, because we all a lot of times focus on the behavior of the kids, right? Behavior is a symptom. It is not the disease. Okay? And no, I'm not calling your kids diseases or anything like that. I'm just saying using language here that I think we understand. A behavior is a symptom. It's not the disease. And now I gave you a picture there, right? What's the picture?
Apple with the smiley face.
How do those apples look on that apple tree? Those look like good apples? They don't look like good apples, right? So here's what Ted Tripp says. The book I took this from is I just got the picture on the internet, but the book is called Shepherding a Child's Heart. It's a really good book. I'm like 90% finished with it right now. It's not very long, but it's a good book. But Ted Tripp says it's like if you have a tree, an apple tree in your yard that only produces blighted and really gnarly looking apples. And so you decide you're going to fix the tree. And so you go out to the store and you buy a bag of really nice looking apples and you tie them with fishing line to the branches of that tree. You're not actually changing the nature of the tree. All you're doing is putting on a show. And there's a similarity there, right? If we just focus on the behavior of our kids, and we just try to get the behavior to look like what we want, that's like tying an apple on the tree. We're not changing the nature of the tree. We're not actually fixing any of the problems. We're just tie an apple. Just hang another apple on that tree. Okay? And it might look good, at least if you don't get too close. And it might look good if you don't watch it for too long. But the reality is we're not actually doing anything that's helpful to it. Okay? And so we need to understand behavior is a symptom. It's not the problem. It's not the disease. And if you understand it, when you go to the doctor, if the doctor just treats your symptoms, but they never actually do anything about the disease, they give Sarah a bottle of Tylenol and say, hey, we're not going to do surgery to fix your knee, just take some Tylenol. Well, there may be some days where that'd be enough, and okay, I can get around. But it doesn't fix the problem. It just covers it, it just masks it. It doesn't actually solve anything. And so, the issue when it comes to our children, when it comes to parenting, is we have to be willing to go beyond the symptoms and start looking for what's the root problem here. And that's what we're talking about the heart. Okay. So secondly, behavior reveals the heart. Got a couple verses to look at here. Behavior reveals the heart. Who'd look them up for us? Proverbs 4:23 and Mark 7:21. Are you willing to read one of those for us? Don't all volunteer at the same time. Levi, what do you got?
Mark 7:21.
Okay, Mark 7:21. Read that one for us.
For from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders.
So, adulteries, fornications, and murders. I'm in Matthew, that doesn't look right. Okay. Mark, that's better. Okay. All right. There's more than that. You want to read down the next verse? The next two verses? Might as well.
Thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man.
Don't we tend to look at those behaviors and think that those are the things that really defile someone, pollute someone, right? Someone gets involved here in sexual immorality, in murder, in greed and deceitfulness. Don't we tend to think that those actions are really, they really have a corrupting influence on somebody, right? When you see someone who does those things, and we see that it really seems to mess their life up. It really seems to bring that kind of corrupting influence. What does Jesus say though? Where does the defilement come from? Does it come from those behaviors? Are those behaviors defiling, according to Jesus?
It's the heart.
It's actually not those behaviors, right? Murder doesn't defile somebody. Sexual immorality doesn't defile somebody. Adultery doesn't defile someone, Jesus says. You think, wait, well, hold on a second. Really? Yeah. What is it? Jesus says the heart. He said these things that come up out of the heart that defile. Now, those actions they're not good. We're not saying that they're excusable. What we're saying is those actions are not in and of themselves the problem. Those behaviors are a symptom of a deeper problem, okay? A heart issue. That's what we're talking about. Okay? How about Proverbs 4:23? Phil?
Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life.
That word spring, it's the idea of it's a spring. It's like an artesian well. Okay, the water literally bubbles up out of the ground. You can't stop an artesian well, by the way. You can try, you can, cement it over, whatever. The water's going to find a way to get out and out. Okay, but that's the idea, is that he's saying we should guard or protect or preserve our heart because our whole life springs up out of that. That's how important this issue of the heart is. And so behavior reveals the heart. If you want to know what the heart is, look at the behavior, and that's going to give you an idea of what's going on in the heart. Now we'll talk a little bit about, eventually we'll talk about how we get there, because that's a big part of our job as parents, is trying to figure out how to go from what I see in the behavior to what is the heart issue here, okay? And how do I address that? But we'll get to that. Have your kids ever, have they ever behaved in a way that was very inconvenient for you?
Only today.
Or embarrassing to you? And a lot of times when we react to their behavior, isn't it because we're inconvenienced or we're embarrassed? Kids have a knack for that, finding the most embarrassing times and circumstances and situations. They're like perfect behavior at home until you have a guest over, right? All of a sudden you have guests over and then they're just like, or you try to go out to dinner or something and you go to a restaurant and that's the place they decide to have their meltdown. It's like, why couldn't you do that in the car before nobody had to see us? No, we got in a public place. Or, again, it's in those times where you are just, it's like, why do they have to pick this time? This is the worst time. I'm so busy. I've got so many things I've got to do. And then they're going to act up. Then they're going to be in control. Okay? The kids are like that. But here's the thing. We have to really keep this in mind. Our children's behavior is not merely an inconvenience or embarrassment to us. It actually is showing us a glimpse of what's in their heart. A lot of times we can, again, our initial reaction to their behavior is inconvenience, it's embarrassment, and so I react to that very negatively. Okay. But the reality is I need to see that what they're doing is they're actually showing me something that's going on. They're showing me something of their heart. And I need to learn to be perceptive to that. I gotta learn to pay attention for that. Now most parenting, this is the next point in your notes, most parenting focuses on controlling behavior. Most parenting, and when I say most parenting, I'm really probably talking about most parenting advice or most teaching on parenting, but really a lot of what we end up doing is about trying to control behavior. But what we've just been saying is that controlling behavior is not really what parenting is all about from a Christian perspective. Okay? So there's something more. When your child disobeys, our tendency is to just try to figure out a way to get them to do what they're supposed to do, right? Just find a way to get them to do what we want them to do or what they're supposed to be doing. But when your child is disobeying, do you stop to think about what that says about their heart? About what they're worshiping? This is I think a fundamental idea that I just try to think through, just in my own life. Okay, I'm not even from the perspective of parenting, but just trying to think about why do I do what I do? And as I began to dig down into that, to discover the idols that are in my heart, that the idols that I'm worshiping when I do what I know is wrong, because I'm just worshiping an idol. I've got something that I love, that I want more than God. Well, guess what? Our kids, that's their natural state. So when your child is disobeying, do you ever stop to ask that question? Well, what is it that he's worshiping here? What is this idol in his heart at this moment? What is she really, really treasuring and cherishing right now that she wants more than anything? And that's important to ask. So Tripp says this in the book, a change in behavior that does not stem from a change in heart is not commendable, it's condemnable. So if we can control our kids' behavior without changing their heart, we're actually doing something bad to them. Because we're actually moving them away from the gospel, not to the gospel.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, I think, maybe, if I remember what I said. Can we play back the tape? If you can change your kids' behavior without changing their heart, you're moving them away from the gospel. Because you're giving them a sense in which this idea that they can do this on their own, apart from Christ. But let's think about what is the gospel. Fundamentally, the gospel is the message that you and I are sinners. We've sinned against God, we've rebelled, and because of our sin against God, God has condemned us, rightfully. That we deserve to be condemned because we've sinned against God. We've not regarded Him, we've not worshiped Him, we've not honored Him. And so He has rightly and justly condemned us. And we are without hope because there is nothing we can do in and of ourselves to please God. There's nothing we can do to put an end to God's anger about our sin. There's nothing we can do. We are completely lost. That's the terminology of the Bible. We're lost. We're dead. But God sent His Son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus died for us. Jesus died for you. And because Jesus died for you, and He offers you the gift of forgiveness, He offers you the gift of eternal life, not because you're good enough to earn it. That's the whole point. You can't be good enough and you can't earn it. No, He offers you the gift of life when you believe and you trust in Him. But as long as we're trying to earn it, as long as we're trying to be good enough, we're not trusting in Him. So, as long as we're working hard to be pleasing to God, we're actually not. And we can't. We're moving away from that. So with our kids, if we are trying to get them to be pleasing to God without dealing with their hearts, we're not moving them toward the gospel. Okay? We're moving them away. And so it's really a serious issue. We need to think about this very much. This kind of gets to what Sarah said earlier, the whole issue of the Pharisees. Why don't you turn to Matthew 15. Let's look at that, Matthew 15, 7 and 8. And then Isaiah 29 is actually the verse that Jesus quotes in Matthew 15. So we can read them both. Yeah. Go ahead, Matthew 15.
You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me.
Verse 9? Or no, I'm sorry, just 8. Okay. So, these people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And Isaiah, again, that's taken straight from Isaiah. That's Isaiah 29:13. I don't think we need to read it. It says the same thing. But that's, I put the reference in there. When we focus solely on our behavior, you know what we're doing with our kids? We're teaching them to be Pharisees. Because that's what Jesus condemned the Pharisees for. So if we just focus on get them to do what I want, just get them to obey, without addressing the heart, then we are actually, again, as I said, we're moving our kids away from the gospel. We're moving them toward becoming Pharisees. These were unbelieving people who could not see who Jesus really was because they were so wrapped up in their self-righteousness. And so we can create some really good, moral, obedient, self-righteous people in our homes. If we just focus on follow the rules, do what I say, and we find what it is. Now, what does that actually look like? What are the techniques that we use if we're going to just try to get the behavior, just kind of control the behavior? What are the techniques we use? Well, I've got a list of them there for you. You might get some of them. Maybe you know what they are. It's called bribery. Okay, the first one. He said positive reinforcement. Right? The blank is actually bribery, okay? If you'll be good in the candy store today, mommy's going to buy you a candy bar. That's just trying to control external behavior. That's not addressing the heart. That's not asking. So what are we doing? We're just hanging an apple on that tree, right? We're not actually dealing with the problem. That's bribery, okay? How about this next one? Random penalty. Random penalty. All right, the next time you say shut up, you're gonna have to put $1 in this jar. What in the world does that have to do with, what? Oh, okay, but I'm gonna get you to do what I want you to do, and I'm gonna make a penalty. Okay, just hang an apple on that tree. I'm not dealing with the heart. I'm not trying to figure out why my child is speaking the way he's speaking. I'm not trying to find out why he is saying that, what he's trying to express and needs to learn how to express properly. No, I'm just controlled behavior. Stop doing that behavior that I don't like, or that's embarrassing to me, or that's inconvenient for me. Okay, and I'll find a way to make you stop. I'll use a random penalty to do it. Okay. Third one here. This one is a big one. Guilt or manipulation. Okay. It makes me so sad when you disobey. Now you've ruined my day. Well, that's just emotional manipulation. That's just guilt. Okay. But again, we're not actually addressing the problem. Okay? Remember, go back to the very first thing I told you tonight. As we live under God's authority, so our children need to live under our authority. Your children don't need to obey you because it makes you happy. They don't need to obey you in order to not ruin your day. That's not the motivation for obedience. That's not the reason to obey. They need to obey you because, well, you know what? Mommy and daddy have to obey God. And you need to learn to obey God too. And so you need to obey me. Like there's a logic here that we need to teach. And that's the point here. But if we just say, no, it makes mommy sad when you do that, well, we're not teaching the true motivation here. We're manipulating using guilt. That's not, again, these can be effective to some degree in some circumstances and with some kids. Okay? They work enough that people use them and keep using them. And they write books about them and they sell lots of things and they do all this stuff. But this is not biblical parenting. Okay? Ooh, the next one. Fear of man. I've had it, right? You've been doing this all day, you won't listen, now you're gonna get it. This is the, I'm gonna just wait till I blow my top, and now I just can't stand it anymore, and now I'm gonna punish you, now I'm gonna discipline you. Okay. But what am I doing? I'm teaching you, respond because otherwise you have to deal with my anger. That's the fear of man. I'm teaching my kids to fear man. Right? And then the last one here, we call mere forced obedience. Say you're sorry and share that toy. Well, why? Why? I'm not addressing that. I'm just hanging an apple on that tree. Okay? Just comply and do what I say because I said so. Forced obedience. So these things are just, and these are probably not exhaustive, but certainly this is pretty common ways that we try as parents to control the behavior of our kids. And when I say this, okay, and when I read this, listen, my son is sitting right here, so I have plenty of personal guilt in my own mind and heart as I think about this, and I think back on my own parenting, and I think about my own kids, and so I do not say this at all to be like, well, you people need to learn this stuff, and I've got it all figured out. Please don't misunderstand. Don't think that, okay? Because that's not it, all right? As I read this and study this, I go, man, I should probably teach this class every year for my own sake, okay? Because these are things that I struggle with, okay? And so I understand the struggle, and I think we all do, and I think that's why this is important.
And he
okay?
came out completely normal.
It's not over yet, so
Yeah.
There's still plenty of time. Yeah. Anyways, that's something else that I've said before a number of times, and I always try to remember this, is that if the good news is, if it were up to us, all of us who are parents have already done more than enough to screw our kids up forever. Okay, we really have. You've already messed up enough times that your kids could be totally in the dumpster. You really have. Okay, we all have. Thankfully, by God's grace, not every one of our wrong actions and our failed action, not every one of those things lands, okay? God is very gracious, that our sin does not always bring the consequences that it could bring. And he is so merciful that, especially as Christian parents, when we're trying to learn and grow and do what's right, God is so gracious. And so just understand that. We've already done, I get it, we've done enough that we could easily mess our kids up. But the reality is God is good and gracious. And so that's why we do this, why we're learning, that's why we want to grow, because he is good. And so we can trust him to help with that. So here's the thing, right? Okay. If I have a kid in front of me right now, okay, you're telling me, Pastor, you're telling me this is not about controlling behavior. It's not about just getting him to obey and do what I want him to do. But my kid is in front of me in this moment disobeying. Are you saying I just let him go? No, I'm not saying that, okay? So this is the next point in your notes. We must control behavior. We do, we have to do that. But that cannot be the whole story. Okay? We must control behavior, but that cannot be the whole story. And we're going to get into this in more detail over the next couple of weeks at least. But I'll offer just a brief response to this tonight. Okay? Much of this I've already said. We are the authority in our children's lives. Okay? You are, if you're a parent, you are the authority in your children's, in your child's life. And as God's agent, you are commanded to discipline them for their own good. In fact, the book of Proverbs says that in doing that, you will save them from death. Okay, we'll talk about that. But this is a key thing. So what we're not advocating for here is we're not advocating for simply thinking and reasoning with children about their hearts. Okay. This is not let's not control the behavior. Let's just let them do whatever they want, but let's try to have a conversation with them about their hearts. No, that's not it. We are going to correct their behavior, but we have to then go beyond that. That's what we want to get to. We have to go beyond behavioral correction to then see and try to determine what is causing the behavior. And not just for me to understand that, but I want to we need to try and help our children to understand and to see that the reason you're acting this way is because you have an idol. You have something in your heart that you are loving more than God. And that is why you are doing what you're doing. Okay? And we want to address that idol. We want to address that thing you're loving that you shouldn't be loving, or that thing you're loving in a way you shouldn't be loving it. And we want to address that. And when we correct that, then the behavior will tend to correct itself, and that's the goal. Okay? So that means, here's what Tripp says in his book, and I think this is a helpful thought here. You must help your child ask the questions that will expose the attitude of the heart that resulted in the wrong behavior. How did his heart stray to produce this behavior? In what characteristic ways has his inability or refusal to know and trust and obey God resulted in actions and speech that are wrong? So these are the things that we have to start to try to help our kids to see, help our kids to ask the questions of themselves, help our kids to discover about themselves. Okay. What is it you're believing? What is it you're trusting? What is it you're not trusting in God in this moment? If you're trusting in God, you wouldn't be acting this way. Okay, so then what are you trusting in? What is that thing that you're worshiping? And then as we begin to help our children uncover that, those are the issues we got to deal with. But those are all heart issues, okay? So that's what we're talking about. Yes, we're going to control behavior. We will talk about some of that, but we're going to move beyond that to say, okay, we got to deal with behavior, but then we got to see where the behavior is revealing in the heart. Okay? So we'll look at several examples next week, but I want to look at one example tonight, just a really brief example, and then I'll take questions, and then we'll be done. But this is one that Tripp uses in his opening chapter. He just kind of gives this example. He comes back to it later toward the end of the book again, but it's super common. Everybody knows this. Okay, so I'll just read. Mostly this is taken straight from his book. So take a familiar example from any home where there are 2 or more children. Okay? The children are playing and a fight breaks out over a particular toy. Anybody ever had that happen at their house? Okay, just saying. What's that?
Said no.
If you only have one kid, no. I mean, I hope not. That would be weird, I suppose. But no, anyways. Okay, the fight breaks out. So what is the classic response? Parent walks in, fight is going on. What are the words coming out of mom or dad's mouth in that moment?
Who had it
Who had it first? Okay. Now, the question who had it first totally misses the heart issue. Okay. Now, it is who had it first is an issue of justice, right? Because we want to know. Justice in this instance is, well, whoever had it first, they should have it. But here's the thing, right? Justice operates in favor of the child who is quicker to the draw in getting the toy. That's it, right? So I think of like for Sam and Sarah, Gavin's a whole lot more mobile than Kyla is, although she's doing pretty good. So if he's faster to get to the toy that she wants, well, okay, technically, yeah, he has it first, but that's all that says. So if we just focus on this issue of who had it first, we're just looking at the justice issue. We're not actually dealing with the heart. So if we want to look at this situation in terms of the heart, the issues change. So you walk in, these kids are fighting over the toy. Think about it. Both of them are being selfish, right? Now, this is very deeply ingrained in us. We have this justice thing, right? Well, she had it first, so he's in the wrong. No. Both of them are being selfish. Both of them are sinning, right? They are caring only for themselves. They are caring only about their personal happiness. That's all they're thinking about in that moment. The one is sinning because they took the toy the other one has. The other one is sinning because, well, they're keeping the advantage. When they have the toy, that's their advantage. They're not going to give it, they're not giving it. They're not volunteering it up. Okay. And both of those are sinful things. Why? Because they have to do with the heart. So let's think about this. What are some ways we could approach that? What are some solutions we could give to the situation?
Toy's going away.
Okay, now we'll get to that because that's part of the solution, but I think that's the last part of the solution. It should be. Okay.
So who's going to share it first?
One solution could be we just give it back to the one who had it first, right? I mean, they had it first. There's justice in that. You give the toy back to them. They get it back.
Things we try to do with Gavin when he wants a toy that Kyla's playing with is like, okay, maybe we find another toy she wants that she'll trade you with.
Okay, so there's another way to do it, right? Try to get one child or both to play with a different toy. Maybe try to divert this to another toy to avoid the conflict. Okay. There's a couple issues with that. One is, it doesn't always work that well, right? Because, I don't want to play with the toy dinosaur. He had the truck and I wanted the truck. I don't care if the dinosaur's got lights on it and shoots laser beams. I wanted the truck. Like, it's, you know what I mean? The kids get fit. It's like, who cares about the truck? Just take the toy. But, the other problem with that is it reinforces that personal happiness is what's primary. It reinforces that the child who had it in the beginning, that their personal happiness is primary. So they shouldn't have to give it up. They should be able to keep the toy and play with it and not have to let their sibling have the toy. But see, what you're doing there is you're teaching them that, well, their personal happiness is what really matters. That gets reinforced to them. And actually the other kid too, because, okay, don't take that toy, go play with another toy. But you're not really you're not talking about them about their heart there.
Sharing,
now, what's that?
Praying together, sharing together, or
okay.
teach them how to share.
So how though? How do you share one toy?
Take turns.
Buy a second one. Take turns. But take turns. Then the question is, do I let the one who had it first keep it for their turn, or do I get all of a sudden we're right back where we started. I could give it to the one who took it and make the first child share, but that is certainly unjust to the first child. Okay. I'm reinforcing that injustice of taking this toy, forcibly taking this toy away from them.
Wait a minute, what'd Solomon do?
Okay, so here's what I'm suggesting to you. So we think about this. Is we need to sit down with them and we need to talk with them about whether their fight is showing hearts of love for God, love for others than themselves, or whether they're just loving themselves. Now, that is a conversation that requires questions, lots of questions, especially with young kids, as we begin to try to get them to think about, why are you acting this way? And you can't, by the way, and I've learned this from experience, I still do it, so it doesn't work, okay? If you ever ask your kids, why did you do that? This is the dumbest question in the world to ask, okay?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that not to make you feel bad. I'm saying that because I'm like going, yeah, well, I still fall into that trap all the time. It's really not a profitable question, okay?
I asked Ruthie that, and she goes, no, he did it. I'm like, that's
Not what I asked, right? So we have to be more creative in our questions here, okay? But we want to think about, right? Okay, you had the toy first, and he came in and he wanted it, and so he took it away from you. All right, well, let's set the toy down. Let's talk about this for a minute, right? And he comes in, you're playing with the toy, and he wants the toy from you. Are you loving God in your heart and loving Him in your heart, or are you loving yourself in your heart when you hold on to that toy and you're not giving it to Him? And then him, when he's ripping the toy out of your hand, are you loving God and are you loving your sister, or are you loving yourself? See, we want to try to challenge that. We want to try to get to that question. Again, I'm not like so foolish to think that, with a 1-year-old, you're going to have a deep conversation here. But we start to have these kind of conversations about these things. We start to press on these things with them to help them to understand that the issue here isn't taking the toy or whatever, or keeping the toy. The issue is, who are you loving? Are you loving God and your sister or brother, or are you loving yourself? Because that really is a fundamental issue, isn't it? The real problem is they love themselves so much they won't share the toy. They won't give the toy up. They love the toy so much that they're going to just take it. They love themselves so much they're going to take the toy rather than wait their turn. So that's the key. The key is not the behavior. The key is what's in their heart. What are they loving? So we're going to talk with them. We're going to ask them. We're going to try to show them, especially, this is, again, we're having these conversations lots, okay, over and over again. This is repeated things as the kids are getting older. But the idea is that we're going to try to help them to see that the motivation here of their heart is what's key. We're going to pray about this. Okay, we're going to pray about it with them. We're going to pray about it in front of them. We're going to pray about it when they're not looking, when they're not paying attention, because we're going to pray for our kids, right? And then this is where Sarah said, I think we're going to remove the toy as discipline for both of them, because you're both wrong. Okay, you're wrong because you refuse to share, and you need to love your brother enough to share with him. I know you had it first, but you need to share with your brother. And you're wrong because you try to take something without being patient and loving and gentle, and that's wrong. You can't just take things. That's a wrong way to act, and that shows a heart that doesn't love your sister. So as a result, the consequence is the toy gets put away and nobody's playing with it now. Okay? Because I want you to understand the heart issue. So the whole point here, and again, I like role-playing this, making this way calmer than it would ever actually be. I understand all that. Trust me, again, I've got 5 kids. I know how this goes, okay? There's certainly idealism here in this, but this is the way we need to think. This is the way we need to approach things. This is the way we need to start talking with our kids. Okay? So I think it's important for us to do that. We have to move beyond just the behavior. Yes, we correct the behavior. We can't just, some parents would just be like, well, kids will grow out of it. They let kids fight. That's what kids do. We'll let them fight, right? Or just ignore it. No, we can't. We need to deal with the behavior. The behavior's not good, and it doesn't. But that's not the biggest problem. Okay? The biggest problem is a heart issue. Because if we can teach our kids, or maybe I put it a different way, if our kids are loving others and loving God with their heart, is that conflict going to happen? No. Maybe the one just voluntarily shares it. Yeah, oh, you want it. Okay, well, I was playing with it, but I'll let you play with it, sure. Maybe the other one says, well, you're playing with it, and I really like to play with it, but could I have a turn next? Okay? But that happens because their heart is loving God and loving others the way it should be. So that's what we have to deal with that issue there, okay? And again, this is a whole process. That's the whole point of this. Parenting is not a one-time thing. You don't correct it one time and deal with this one time and it's done. No, it's something we deal with over and over again, but we're teaching. That's the goal. We're trying to teach and train the heart, okay? Not just train the behavior, okay? So we're going to talk more about this next week. Any questions, though, tonight? Or